There is a video that has been watched millions of times in the past week. It does not show a stunning goal. It does not show a last-minute winner. It does not show any of the football magic that the 2026 World Cup was supposed to deliver to a global audience of billions. What it shows is a group of professional footballers standing in a line on an airport tarmac in the United States, their luggage spread open in front of them, while sniffer dogs move methodically through their bags. Players who spent months preparing for the greatest tournament of their lives, athletes at the peak of their physical condition, men who qualified through years of sacrifice to represent their nations on the grandest stage the sport has ever seen, standing in a line waiting for a dog to finish checking their belongings before they were allowed to continue. That image has become the unintended symbol of a World Cup arrival experience that has shocked the football world and raised questions that FIFA is wholly unprepared to answer. Because what you just saw was not an isolated incident involving one team at one airport on one unfortunate afternoon. What happened to Uruguay, to Uzbekistan, to Senegal, to Iraq, to South Africa, and to others is a pattern, a consistent, documented, undeniable pattern of national teams being treated upon arrival in the host nation of this World Cup in ways that have never been seen at any previous edition of this tournament in the history of the sport. And the story begins with a plane that could not take off. On the evening of Sunday the 14th of June, the Uruguayan national team was ready to travel. Their training base in Playa del Carmen, Mexico had served them well. Their preparation was complete. Their opening World Cup match against Saudi Arabia in Miami was less than 24 hours away. Marcelo Bielsa's squad arrived at Cancun International Airport with time to spare, accreditations in hand, luggage loaded, expecting a routine charter flight across the Gulf of Mexico. The plane could not move. The chartered aircraft had not received clearance to enter United States airspace. The documentation required for the flight permit had not been properly filed. The physical aircraft was ready. The crew was ready. The players were ready. But without the correct paperwork, American air traffic control would not authorize the route. And because FIFA is responsible for organizing all travel logistics for every one of the 48 national teams at this tournament, the finger of blame pointed in one direction immediately and unmistakably. Subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications if you want to follow every development in this story. What happened next takes this from embarrassing to genuinely outrageous. The Uruguayan Football Association did not try to soften the situation. Their official statement was direct. The delay, they said, was due to problems beyond the control of their federation. They were waiting for FIFA to arrange a solution. And while they waited, the clock kept moving. Bielsa's mandatory pre-match press conference at the Miami Stadium was scheduled at 8 o'clock that evening. Under FIFA's own tournament regulations, failure of a head coach to attend a mandatory media commitment results in a financial penalty imposed on the federation. So, the governing body that had just grounded Uruguay's plane was simultaneously threatening to fine them for not showing up to the press conference on time. The players were bussed back to the Mocoba Resort Complex 45 minutes from the airport to rest and wait. Diego Forlán, one of the greatest players Uruguay has ever produced, and a man who understands exactly what the night before a World Cup match means for a footballer's preparation, watched all of this unfold and posted 3 words on social media. 3 words that captured what everyone watching was already thinking. Who is to blame? It was a question that deserved a direct answer. It received a statement. FIFA eventually blamed the airline, describing the situation as an airline permitting error in Mexico. A replacement aircraft was scrambled from South Florida. Uruguay departed Cancun at 4:46 in the afternoon. They landed at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport at 7:27 in the evening, 27 minutes past the team's original lockdown deadline. Police escorts rushed the squad through the streets to their hotel. Bielsa's press conference went ahead, delayed under circumstances that no head coach should ever face. The night before his team's opening World Cup match, while Saudi Arabia rested, Uruguay panicked on a tarmac. And then, before that story had even fully settled, another video emerged, this one from New York. And this one featured a man who knows what it means to win a World Cup. Fabio Cannavaro is one of the most decorated footballers of his generation. He captained Italy to the 2006 World Cup title. He won the Ballon d'Or that same year. He is now the head coach of Uzbekistan, a nation making their first ever appearance at a World Cup. A story that should have been celebrated purely for its historic significance. When Cannavaro arrived with his squad in New York ahead of their warm-up match against the Netherlands, cameras captured something that immediately spread across every football network in the world. The entire Uzbekistan delegation was lined up outside their team bus on the tarmac. Sniffer dogs moved through their luggage. Security personnel ran handheld metal detector wands over players and coaching staff one by one. Cannavaro himself was visibly surprised by the intensity of the inspection. He told reporters afterward that he was told it was standard procedure, but that as far as he could see, his squad appeared to be the only group subjected to checks of that thoroughness at that moment. He described the process as deeply isolating for his players. Young men on the eve of their country's first World Cup appearance, standing in a line while dogs sniffed through their bags. If this pattern of events is concerning to you as a football supporter, and it should be, this is the moment to subscribe to the channel because what happened to Senegal made everything that came before it look minor. Footage circulated online showing the Senegal's national team undergoing extensive security inspections on the airport tarmac. Players were asked to remove their shoes. Bags were opened and individually searched. The images spread instantly. Social media erupted. They are being treated like criminals, wrote one observer, whose words were shared hundreds of thousands of times. This is a disgrace, wrote another. The Senegal's Football Federation moved quickly to release a statement clarifying that the procedure was carried out in compliance with applicable airport security regulations and that no particular incident had been reported. But the images had already been seen, and no statement could unsee them. South Africa's experience was different in nature but equally damaging in impact. The country's sports minister described the visa complications faced by members of the South African delegation as embarrassing and grossly unfair. A comment from a government minister about the treatment of their own national team ahead of a World Cup they had qualified for legitimately, in a country that had promised the world that everyone would be welcome. And then there's Iraq. The story that crystallizes everything that is wrong with how this tournament has treated its participants at the border. Iraq's star striker Iman Hussein landed in Chicago's O'Hare International Airport as one of the most important players in his national team's World Cup campaign. He had earned his place through years of goals, through qualifying campaigns, through every sacrifice professional football demands. American border officials detained him for nearly 7 hours. During that time, his personal mobile phone was inspected and searched. He was eventually allowed to enter the country, but the experience left a mark that no number of official statements could erase. Hussein said it publicly with a clarity that cut through every piece of diplomatic language the football world had produced around this tournament's border issues. Why is America hosting the World Cup if it is so hostile to foreign nationals? It's the question that nobody in FIFA's hierarchy has been willing to answer. Honestly, Iraq's team photographer Talal Salah was not so fortunate. He was held for more than 10 hours at O'Hare. His phone was also examined. After all of that, he was denied entry entirely. The man whose job was to document his country's historic World Cup campaign, who had traveled thousands of miles for the privilege of being present at those matches, was put on a flight home. No explanation was offered publicly. No appeal process was available. The decision was final and immediate. Moroccan supporters who had legally purchased tickets to watch their team play reported visa denials without any explanation provided. Dozens of fans, people who had saved money, planned their trips, bought their flights and their tickets through official channels, received rejections that gave them nothing to work with. No reason, no recourse, no refund pathway from a ticketing system that had already made returning money one of the most complicated processes in World Cup history. Over 120 immigration rights organizations issued a formal travel warning ahead of the tournament. Their message was unambiguous. Fans, players, journalists, and officials traveling to the 2026 World Cup could face serious rights violations as a result of the immigration enforcement environment currently operating in the United States. It was not a fringe opinion. It was a coordinated statement from more than 100 separate organizations, each of whom had looked at the evidence and reached the same conclusion. FIFA's response to all of it followed its now familiar formula. Host nations have sovereignty over their immigration procedures. The organization cannot intervene in those decisions. The tournament is proceeding as planned. That formula deserves to be examined for exactly what it is. FIFA spent years negotiating hosting rights with the United States, Canada, and Mexico. FIFA signed contracts worth billions of dollars with the host nation governments. FIFA made public promises, including statements from its own president at its own Congress that everyone would be welcome at this tournament. And when teams were grounded on tarmacs, when star players had their phones searched for 7 hours at midnight in Chicago, when photographers were deported after a decade of covering their national team, FIFA pointed at sovereignty and said there was nothing to be done. The security apparatus surrounding this World Cup is genuinely unprecedented in scale. Biometric screening systems, AI-powered surveillance at stadiums, robotic monitoring technologies, sniffer dog units deployed across every host venue. It is the most heavily secured sporting event in the history of the sport. That level of security has a legitimate purpose. Nobody serious argues that a tournament of this size and global visibility should be unprotected. But there is a fundamental difference between security that protects a tournament and security that humiliates the participants. There is a difference between screening that applies consistently to every delegation and screening that one World Cup winning head coach publicly described as being applied only to his squad, while others pass through without comparable checks. There is a difference between a border process that treats professional footballers as invited guests of a global sporting event, and one that treats them as suspects to be detained, questioned, and occasionally turned away. That difference matters not just symbolically, not just in terms of optics or headlines. It matters because the World Cup is built on a premise that has sustained it for nearly a century. The premise that football belongs to everyone, that a team from Somalia deserves the same dignity of welcome as a team from Germany, that a player from Iraq crossing into the United States to play in the biggest match of his life should be able to do so without spending 7 hours in a room answering questions about his phone. When that premise is compromised, something essential about the tournament is compromised with it. And the images from those airport tarmacs, the lines of players, the open bags, the dogs moving methodically through the luggage of men who trained for years to be there, are going to follow this World Cup long after the final whistle blows at Matif Stadium in July. Bye.